Hello everybody, it's been a while, but I am Dandy and welcome to Core Keeper. Today is going to be the first of a couple small videos I make about this game. As I finished achievement hunting it, there was just a lot of new info and a lot of things that I had forgotten, so I wanted to make a few videos touching specifically on all of the bosses of this game. I'm going to break it down into sections based on kind of roughly how the bosses are organized throughout the game, so let's just dive right into it. Alright, welcome to my humble base. It's been a while since we've been here. I showed off some farming methods to get beautiful stats like I have here. But before we get into this, I wanted to say that you will see spoilers in this video, and a lot of them. I have completely achievement hunted this game, which means I have done basically everything there is to do, and am currently wearing and using in-game armor. This video is less of a guide on how to beat bosses at the level that you would be at when you are fighting them, and more so an overview of what the bosses are, the general order you should fight them, and still some tips on how you can get around beating them, even though it will be very easy for me as somebody, again, with maximized stats and all in-game gear. That being said, let's get into it. So the first couple bosses, I'm going to go over 4 bosses in this first video. The first 4 bosses I'm going over are the bosses that lie within this first ring right here. So this orange ring that you see on the map. This is the starter area. I mean, technically, roughly around here is the starter area, but there will be an invincible wall that enshrines the beginning of this game until you defeat 3 bosses. Technically there are 5 bosses within this ring. I will be showing you 4 of them today, as the 5th one is a slime, and I intend to do all of the slimes for the most part, minus the starting boss, in their own video. So let's just get right into it, starting with the very first boss that you're going to fight, a giant slime known as Glurch, the Abominable Mass, or the Abominous Mass, sorry. So if you're this late in the game, one thing that's worth noting is that to refight bosses, you're going to want to talk to a fella that looks like this. He's a little merchant that sells these relics, and these relics are used to return bosses to life so that you can grind for their loot. So I already have a couple for a boss we'll fight later, so I'm going to go ahead and buy just one for the giant slime, and one for the Hive Mother, which again we will get into a little later, but let's go fight the giant slime. Alright, so this probably doesn't bear repeating, but again, I am very late in the game, so my map will look a little different than yours because of all the work I've done to it. But when you're looking to fight the first giant slime boss, he will already be spawned in, and he will be in an area that looks like this. So a big, wide open arena with just slime all over the place, slime enemies all over the place. It'll be very easy to recognize your first time through, especially because sitting on what will be a similar idol to this will actually be Glurch the Abominous Mass. So here, in just a second, I'm going to spawn him in, and you can see what you're in for. Being the first boss in the game, this one is pretty simple. The only thing that you want to worry about is not letting him touch you, because the way this boss works is once you get close, he's going to start moving at you. This is his only attack, is jumping at you and trying to squish you, so you don't have a lot to worry about outside of a very few things, such as the fact that the orange slime on the ground will slow you naturally. So if your character's not very fast yet, you might find it hard to get away from the boss. Tips for this are to look for areas on the ground that have no slime in them, and try to run your paths through that, because it gives you that little speed boost you need to get around things. Early in the game, you'll find some relics like a feather that will give you a dash. I currently have the ability to just teleport out of danger when I need to, so this boss basically poses no threat to me, especially at this point in the game. It is also worth noting, though, that this boss can eat through walls, so if you try to hide in a corner, he's just going to destroy all the stuff that's around you. He won't chase you forever, so if you run far enough away, you feel like you can't beat him, he will eventually return to the center of the arena where he originally was. But again, for the most part, this is mostly just kiting a boss around and destroying him. With multiple people, you can have one person focused on running, while other people focus on dealing damage. He will switch aggro occasionally, but it's not really that big of a deal because he is very predictable. Now, when you get him down to a certain health threshold, he's going to turn red and start jumping faster. This is the only change in his overall pattern or attack throughout the entire fight, and it happens around half health. Obviously, I have a really strong weapon, so I knocked him to almost dead there. But again, here, it's just about making sure you keep your distance, utilize those sections of not slime to run through, and you can even do things like go under him if you need to. Works best with a dash, but it's possible. So, whenever you've dealt enough damage, you will eventually defeat him. And boom, there he goes. You will be provided your first chest. These chests hold a variety of loot, some very good gear, some weapons, pet food. It will always hold Glurch's Eye, which is important for you to take as a very, very important quest item, and Slime Oil, which is something that you would place in a suitable bedroom to summon one of the first merchants you will find in the game. So make sure to take those among other things, and if you'd like, a nice big free chest that looks really cool, and be proud of yourself as you finished the first boss. Now, if you've never played this game before, how you get out of the starting area is to find the 3 crystals for these 3 statues to reactivate the core itself, this funny little rock with the eyeball that's following me. After defeating our friend Glurch, you will go to the crystal matching his description here, or the rock matching his description, and insert his crystal. I've already done this, so I don't have to worry about it, but what this does is actually gives you a scanner that will show you the location of Gorm the Devourer, which is another big boss we're about to defeat, and Malugaz the Corrupted. These are the other 2 bosses, Gorm the Devourer right here, and Malugaz the Corrupted right here, that we're going to need to defeat to move out of the starting area of this game. There is one, or technically 2 other bosses in the starter area, but I'll go over one of them, and the other is the slime, and I intend to cover all of the slimes, even including Glurch, in their own separate video, just to group them all together. So, but for now, let's go after the second of our hunts, a little fella called Gorm the Devourer. So earlier, you'll remember me mentioning this orange circle here. So this orange circle is actually the pathway that Gorm the Devourer will be taking around the map. Until you kill him, you will hear a constant enemy circling the map and destroying everything in its path forever. So let's head out to that circle and see where we can respawn Gorm, since I've obviously already killed him. Alright, so welcome to the path of Gorm the Devourer. You'll notice that it is a pretty obvious break between the walls. There's just going to be this big wide open section with a trail of slime all the way around it. This is where you'll find Gorm the Devourer. Usually he'll just be existing. You'll have to kind of set up a position on the map and wait for him to circle around. But obviously I've killed him, so right now the place is mostly just covered with errant slimes and the occasional cave dweller. That being said, I'm working my way towards the area that I can respawn the boss, so I will see y'all there. So if you're trying to find where this boss's spawn is on the map, I can recommend, or give you a piece of advice here. So obviously we've been running along this big slimy circular area here, and you'll see that there's this one little trail off down below that breaks out of the actual circle itself. So this is where you're going to want to look for. Maybe it's on the bottom every time, it could be off to the sides, but just look for a little breakaway trail, and this is where you're going to find the respawn plate for our friend Gorm the Devourer. So you can see I'm running down here now, and here is a whole bunch of bones, a variety of enemies that are very upset that I'm here, and then the tile spawn for Gorm the Devourer. So running around that circle, I got a lot of random garbage in my inventory, but I also have a Gorm summoning idol. So we're going to take it, place it right there, and watch Gorm spawn. There he is. Alright, so Gorm is not aggressive off rip. Gorm is actually just going to take off into the night and continue going down that trail. I'm hurting myself by chasing him. But, so this is what Gorm the Devourer is. It's a giant worm boss that, again, just follows this trail and runs around the entire outside of the map, ignoring the player and barreling through everything in its way. So enemies on the track, any structures you've built over his path, he will devour them all and just chew through in this circle forever. You can stop him, however, by dealing enough damage. So preparing for this boss means choosing a section of the map you're ready to fight in and dealing enough damage before he passes that he stops to fight you. So you can see I'm strong enough that just by hitting him one time, I have stopped him, and now he's going to start circling. Gorm the Devourer will just essentially do figure eights and big loops and circle around to try to destroy you. So it's relatively easy to dodge, you just have to look out for the oncoming giant worm, but he is pretty quick, so at lower levels with less speed or no blink ability, you might find yourself struggling because this boss will just barrel right through you. Other than that, there's not a lot of finesse to this fight. It's just making sure you deal enough damage up front and avoid his entire massive body hitbox so that you can kill him. So you can see here his entire body can take damage. You don't have to aim for any particular part, although the glowing crystal does look like it's what you would want to aim for. Anywhere on the boss is good. So I'll wait for him to circle back around one more time and we'll go ahead and end this boss fight. There he goes. A very tanky boss, but not a very complex one. With Gorm defeated, you will see another giant boss chest, which has, again, a variety of loot, some of the more prominent, if you're lucky, being something like Gorm's stomach bag. Gorm's stomach bag is usually, at this point in the game, an upgrade to the backpack you're carrying, which provides you more inventory slots, which, as you can see by how much stuff I'm carrying, is always useful. You'll also see a mysterious idol, which attracts someone looking for a place to move in if you put it in a suitable bedroom. So again, another merchant spawn. And last but not least, the guaranteed spawn every single time is going to be Gorm's Horn. Gorm's Horn is the next crystal of the two, like the Glurch Eye I showed you earlier. Gorm's Horn is the item that's going to allow you to slot the second crystal, build a few additional items, and look for the final boss. Again, there are other things, larva ring, some clothes, a musket, but for now I don't need any of this. So grab what you'd like, take the chest, and move on to the third of the 3 crystal bosses. Now this item that I'm using right here to get back to base, they're called recall idols. They're incredibly handy because they teleport you directly back into the little spawn circle in your base. So you'll see I'm right back here, right in front of our big friend, which means I can walk over to Gorm the Devourer and slot his horn. And slotting the horn gives you 3 incredible items. A Larva Spike Club, so just a solid weapon if you're a melee build. A Grubzooka, which is an incredible weapon, not because of the damage it does as a projectile launcher, but because it actually can go through relatively weak walls. So sand and turf walls, the stuff that spawns in the core area here, this will chew right through them. So it's really good for opening up wide areas or strip mining if you're not looking for mining experience. And last but not least, the Recall Idol. Very inexpensive, especially if you're playing this game a lot. You'll run across a ton of ancient gemstones and mechanical parts, and it only costs 1 of each to build a recall idol. I always carry a handful with me everywhere I go, because using one of these allows you to teleport back home regardless of where you are. And with how quickly your inventory fills up, especially in the early game when you're grinding for resources, it's really, really efficient to have a bunch of these in your pocket. So, now that we've killed Gorm, that leaves only one other enemy, and that's Malugaz the Corrupted. So Malugaz the Corrupted is the last of the Crystal Heart holders, and we'll find him. And I'm just going to go straight to his boss room, but remember, if you're trying to find them on your world, build the scanners. So the Malugaz scanner and the Gorm scanner will essentially just place a pin on the map exactly where the boss is. I've already done that, so I'm not going to, but again, if you're hunting for these bosses for the first time, these will show you where they are in your world, because their location varies from world to world. So I'll see y'all there. Alright, we've just arrived where Malugaz is. Now, let me show you this on the map real quick. You can see we're actually just outside of this area here. So, earlier I may have made the misstep of saying that this was the boundary of the first zone. Technically it's here. There's going to be a cavern that goes around the cave area of the entire outer zone. So on this side it's the bugs, on this side it's the moss caves, but there are 3 biomes that exist outside of the center area, and it's blocked off by an indestructible wall. So, but this is the area here where you will find Malugaz. So it's not marked in any bossish way, I just remember where this is, and technically I could go and put a pin there to remind myself. But, no, I don't want to do that. But Malugaz is going to be in kind of a maze, and when you discover it, you're definitely going to have to figure your way through the maze. As you can see, I've already done this. I've farmed this boss quite a few times, but the maze walls, for the most part, are indestructible. So even with the Soul Seeker, which is a super late game, very hard to obtain pickaxe that is literally indestructible, I can't get through. Even with the absolute best mining implement in the game, the Stormbringer, I cannot destroy these walls. So I might be able to cheese it potentially with some of the late game mining equipment as well, but for the most part it doesn't matter. You're going to want to find this maze and work your way through the rooms. You'll probably need bridges, you'll definitely need torches, and you'll have to understand that there will be enemies in here to fight for the most part. I've destroyed a lot of the material that spawns enemies in this cave because my brother needed it for something that I am not going to get into. He is a funny little artist. But so you just travel from room to room throughout this indestructible maze, gather plenty of loot, and eventually you will find your way to the center, which houses the boss. And again, as you can see, you're going to need platforms or some kind of way to traverse gaps. But when you find this room, you'll know you'll have found it. So there's a giant circular chamber surrounded by pit. Usually this room has a throne and a bunch of other stuff, but when you see the platform in the middle with the skull, you'll know you're ready to fight the boss. Now I should have the stuff I need to fight the boss here. It looks like I've used all of it in previous boss fights. So we will be right back with the thing to spawn the boss. Whoopsie. Alright, so just a brief pause now that I'm back at the base. To summon the boss, you need a crystal skull. So you can see here I have 10 crystal skull shards. I know I had some lying around somewhere. So take those crystal skull shards, as long as you have 3 or more, put them in your inventory and just right click. You'll see a loading bar, and boom. You can see I've created a skull of the corrupted shaman. So this is the item that you need to summon the boss. Unlike the other bosses, the corrupted shaman is actually not going to be in the world from the start. You will need to summon this boss, but you'll find plenty of these shards just by killing some of the creatures throughout the cave, especially as you're looking for the boss arena itself. So don't worry too much about it. Just make sure you keep these crystal skull shards. But yeah, I'll see you back at the boss room. Alright, so we've made it back to the boss room. I'm going to go ahead and leave 2 of these extra skulls here, just in case I ever need to spawn this boss again. But for now, it's time to get in there. So again, this boss is relatively simple, but compared to the prior 2, I'd say this is actually the hardest of them thus far, for sure. This is definitely the next one you're going to want to do in order, minus a slime boss I'll talk about later that's optional. But this boss is a lot more intense than the other fights. So let's go ahead and get into it. I'm going to lay the skull down anywhere on this platform, and we're going to spawn Malguz. So, Malagaz. Ow. Malagaz, is a giant, scary buff monk that throws fire. This first phase is pretty well defined by that. He's just going to teleport to different areas and attempt to throw fireballs at you, and occasionally summon fire down, ow, from the sky like that. And it's going to create fire obstacles that you don't want to run through because they will hurt you. So this boss is actually a lot more intense than the other ones because it has very genuine boss mechanics. So once you get into the pattern, it's not incredibly hard to dodge. I haven't been putting on a great show of it, but the longer you let him live, the harder it is to navigate his arena. So you're going to want to really try your hardest to burst him down. So you'll see here, I'm going to go ahead and destroy him. And once you lower his health bar, the fight is not over. Malagaz the Corrupted then gets rid of his cloak, releases his fiery skull head and incredibly toned abs, and starts a melee pattern. So from this point forward, the boss is going to teleport directly next to you, run a few steps, and attempt to give you a haymaker. That is, punch you right in the face or smash you into the floor. Every time he does this, he's going to create an area of fire on the ground, making the arena less and less navigable. So you're really going to want to watch where you let him attack you to try to leave open passageways throughout the arena while still dealing damage. So fortunately, it's a relatively predictable pattern, and he doesn't break out of this pattern for the rest of the fight, but it's easy for me to dodge this because I've practiced a lot, and even if I were to run through the fire, I'm pretty high level, so I'm not super worried about dying. When you're not as high level and you have to actually worry about the threat of death, this can be a very stressful fight. So make sure you're prepared with plenty of potions, plenty of food, and strong enough weapons to kill him before he inevitably runs you down. I'm going to go ahead and end this boss fight now, though. Alright, once he's dead, the fire will extinguish. Take a step back just in case. Some of these bosses like to explode when they die. And you'll have yourself another chest. So in this chest, again, there will be a handful of things to look forward to. This looks like a pretty weak drop, honestly. I did get a cool helmet that's pretty nice and helps if you play burning effects a lot. Some more gear that I like to use to make the spawn or the teleport items, the recall idols. But most importantly, our guaranteed drop, the stolen crystal heart. So this is the third of the gems you will need. You would grab that, take it back to the core, and unlock the rest of the map. So we're going to head back to the core because there is one more boss that I want to talk about before we end this video. So we're going to grab a recall idol, and I'll see you back at base. Alright, now that we're back at base, I think you know how this goes. We've already slotted 2 of the 3 crystals. You're going to go to Malagaz's statue and slot it in, which will provide you a couple things. One, a ritual dagger, a very cool weapon, just a nice, quick, and easy to use dagger, fast attack, some glow. A blue leather tome. So this is an offhand item that actually gives you magic damage and mana every second. So if you're going for one of those magic builds, this is an incredible item to have. And most importantly, the ancient hologram pad. So what this does is it materializes a spirit from the past, which doesn't mean a lot just to read out loud, but if you come into my very cluttered workshop, then I will show you what that looks like. So down here is actually where I stored it, next to my funny giant bug and some of my cool trees. And my very fancy space bed. You'll see this is the hologram from the past. So this hologram is going to be incredibly important, and I'll get into this in the later videos I make about this, but this hologram sells you the tracker for every single other boss in the game. So we have all of the slime bosses. So we have the Hive Mother, poisonous, well, these are the slimes, the poisonous mass, the aquatic mass, the molten mass, and then we have the Hive Mother scanner, which Hive Mother is the last boss I'm going to showcase in this video here in just a second, so very important to have. But there's also the Atlantean Worm, which is the first boss of a trio that leads you to the end of the game. It also sells them for Azios the Sky Titan, Amarat the Sea Titan, Ra-Akar the Sand Titan, Druidra the Wild Titan, Siridra the Ice Titan, and Pydra the Fire Titan. And then you also have 3 items here that are going to be important for getting into the end game, and that's the large shiny glimmering object, an expert lure, and a thumper. These are what you use to summon the first of the titans, the sky, sea, and sand, before moving on to wild, ice, and fire. So a lot of stuff here, but this is an incredibly important piece, or incredibly important merchant for getting through the rest of the game. Definitely something that you cannot live without because of these 3 items right here. So either way, there's one more boss I want to show y'all, which you saw in the last video, and it's the last of the bosses that you're really going to fight before you get out of this main area, not including the slime, I know, and that is going to be the Hive Mother. So let's go ahead and head over there. Alright, so I took a teleporter close to the Hive Mother that I have found. Fun fact, and I'll repeat this in the future, but you will see teleporters like this, which you can activate, and they will be hidden near almost every major boss arena. It is a really cool thing they added, which makes it a lot easier to go to and from bosses. So always look around when you're preparing to fight a major boss, because you might find one of these, and it lets you teleport directly here from your base. So if you're not a fan of bugs or new to this game, this is going to be one of the worst areas because it's so gooey and so covered in bugs, but this is where you're going to find the Hive Mother. So you'll remember earlier that I might have shown this off in my video about farming the certain levels or farming up certain skills. So this boss is super great, almost a required necessity, absolutely necessitable for grinding levels if you don't intend to just play this game forever. If you're like me and you wanted to get to the end of the game, this boss is almost pivotal for helping you grind magic, vitality, range, and melee, and even summoning. I use this boss to grind a lot of different levels, so very, very useful. So the boss will be here right away, and the boss is super chill until you damage it, which I've just done with some AoE damage. So until you damage this boss, it's just going to sit there and wait for you to attack so you can set up the arena. Once you damage it, a couple things are going to start happening. One, it's going to start spitting these projectiles at you, which you can see, and they're going to put acid on the floor. A little hard to see the acid because of all of the conveyor belts I put down, but the floor is completely covered with acid right now, so if you were not standing on a platform over it, you would be taking constant damage like I am now. The conveyor belts do, in fact, prevent you from taking the damage of the acid, though, so covering the floor in some kind of something is very useful. Beyond that, it's also going to start spawning enemies out of one of these little buttholes in the ground, I guess. You can see they spawn giant egg sacs, which will rupture and form enemies. These enemies are great for grinding, but are very inconvenient for early game fights, especially if you're unable to set the arena up, because you won't be able to make arena edits like this most likely until after you fought this boss, based on mining level and other things like that. You can kill these eggs before they release their enemies to prevent them from spawning enemies, but again, it is a very heavy DPS check, so you're gonna have a lot of damage to be able to get through these eggs before they hatch because it's very quick. But as you can see, it is possible. So now, once you've kind of learned these mechanics and have played through it, you're going to want to damage the boss until they get to their phase transition, which, like other bosses, they screech and turn red. From here, you'll see things start spawning ever so slightly quicker. so there's 2 spawners going instead of 1, and the spit attack that the boss uses is going to happen more frequently, so you're going to have to stay on your toes and try to avoid all this damage because it will be flying at you faster. So again, this boss just takes some learning, takes some setup, and like most bosses in this game, is a bit of a DPS check or a tank check. If you're able to just tank a bunch of stuff and have a lot of healing set up, you will outlive the boss, but that can be very difficult in the early game. Once you get to a point where you feel comfortable, you finish the boss fight victoriously. Once the boss is dead, like many others before her, she'll explode and leave you a wonderful little chest full of goodies. So this was actually a really bad drop. You can get some pretty cool stuff from this boss, but I got a bunch of garbage with the exception of the larva helm. The larva helm is a really funny item because it makes you look like a funny little worm. If you get the larva body as well, you just look like one of those worms. So, and if you have both of them, you're disguised as a larva, which means you won't get attacked, which is really, really handy. But the other benefit of it is that it gives you mining damage, which is going to be really helpful in the early game. At this point in the game, for me, mining damage isn't that big a deal because, again, I have the Stormbringer, right? I can just eat through walls, no problem. But early in the game, having something like this that gives you bonus mining damage is absolutely integral and can help you with gathering resources to continue advancing to the next stage. But anyway, let's head back to base. Alrighty, well those were the first 4 major bosses you're going to fight in order, with the exception of a slime boss that, again, I'm just going to make a whole slime video. There's like 6 slime bosses, all of them are optional, so I'll make a video separate just to showcase those, but those are the bosses you're going to want to kill to move on through the game. They each provide a variety of great loot and also just the components you need to move through. The first 3 I showed you are what are going to unlock the grander underground world for you to explore. And then the 4th one that I showed you is just a good one to get out of the way because it sets up what will be a great farming potential in the future. Because if you're playing this game solo, it can be really hard to spend enough time to level all your skills like I have. And as you can see, even in this world that I've spent 100 hours in, I don't have running, crafting, or mining up, and I didn't fish at all for this one. So if you're looking for a fast way to grind, there's just a lot of good stuff you can get into. So, but either way, I've been Dandy. I'm going to go ahead and call this video here. If you have any questions about any of the bosses, please let me know. But otherwise, look forward to other videos I make showcasing the other groupings of bosses throughout this game until I have covered every single boss. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll catch you later. Bye!